All right, welcome back to my YouTube channel where I sit down with people that I find interesting and we have discussions on various topics. Today I have another guest. I'm hoping that it will be a fruitful and informative session. She is a practicing counseling psychologist, a sister, a friend, and an aunt. And this I'm going by your bio on Instagram. And a mental health activist. She is my sister, Tebogo Malatjie. Welcome to my podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. Good to be here.
I look forward to having this conversation with you. We've been planning it for quite some time to do it.
Yep, I'm glad we finally get the chance to get going with it. I think it's going to be a good one.
Mm. So yeah, Tebogo, can you tell us a bit about psychology and what it is that you do in your counseling practice?
Okay, psychology in and of itself is quite broad, but yeah, it's basically the study of human behavior, human thoughts and emotions, and yeah, obviously it entails a lot of mental health disorders and helping people work through that, etc. But on a very practical level, I guess speaking, and there are many different types of psychologists as well. You have your clinical psychologists, research psychologists, counseling psychologists. I think now they just grandfathered in neuropsychologists and all of that. But I particularly am a counseling psychologist, and so I primarily work with people on a very relational level. So I work with people. People don't have to come to me only if there are pathologies present, but just life in general, life stresses. We know life is life and it happens. So the type of clientele that I have is a lot of kind of the common mental health distress that we see. So things like marital issues, phase of life issues, and then some of the things, more common disorders that I kind of deal with mostly in my sphere is things like depression, anxiety, personality disorders, stuff like that. So that's what I cover in my private practice. I offer one-on-one online therapy sessions. But then the rest of my time, I'm actually employed at the University of the Free State at the Student Counseling and Development Unit. And so there I primarily work with and see the student population of the university for any and all of their mental health needs. So that includes the one-on-one therapies, that includes workshops, that includes psychoeducational sessions, all these different things, and then interventions as well. So I specifically this year am heading up a project called Project Empower, which is a project that's specifically looking at the mental health and just overall well-being of student athletes. So with the understanding that they face a lot of pressures because they're not just students and have to perform that way. They're not just athletes and have to perform that way. They're also human beings. And all of that comes with a lot. So it's kind of targeted support for them in all those spheres that they move in and how it links in with their mental health. So yeah, that's in a nutshell what I do on a day-to-day. And then in my free time, I do anything and everything mental health advocate
Related. That's very interesting. So, in a nutshell, basically, you deal mostly with what laypersons think about psychologists, which is sitting down with a person and basically discussing the everyday problems that they have and the solutions that can come from those particular sessions. How has that been effective in your experience in servicing the public as well as the people that you deal with in the university space?
I found it to be very effective, you know. I fully, obviously, believe in the power of psychology, but I think with my approach to it is I look at it more as a empowerment tool and supportive tool rather than a fixing tool, you know, because a lot of people look at it like I have a problem, I need to be fixed or I need a solution. Whereas therapy, in my understanding and in how I practice, it's more about saying, look, you have this car called life. You have this long journey to go. Along the way, the car is going to need to be serviced, either just because of its natural breakdown or you might hit a pothole, or you might run out of petrol, or whatever, right? So instead of me just saying, here's a car, here are the keys, this is how you drive, it's saying, okay, yes, we empower you to know how to move this car, but also do we empower you to know, to have firstly, and to know how to use the toolbox. So do you know how to use the jumper cables? Do you know what goes where? Do you know that you shouldn't put the red on the black? And, do you
Yes.
know how to use the jack? Do you know how to do this and this? So yes, you might need help along the way in using those tools to help the car up and running again, but do you know how to use those things? Because essentially for me, therapy is not meant to be a crutch. It's supposed to be an empowerment space. So when you leave this space, have you been empowered with the knowledge, the understanding, and the skill set to be able to face whatever life throws at you that affects your emotional and mental health in a sustainable and healthy way?
Mm. And
So
I've
I
read
think
once. Okay. No, you
No,
can
sorry, I
go.
was just
You
going
can
to think
continue.
that approach is quite helpful in, do I see it being helpful? Because it's quite great when you see clients and you finish with them and they go, and even when they come back, it's not the same thing. They're not at the same place. So even what you're dealing with, they're further down the road. They're not stuck where
Mhm.
they were. So I think in that, I find it to be quite effective.
I've read once that psychologists are not like doctors, and I'm paraphrasing the entire quote. They're not
Mm.
like doctors. They don't blame the patient when the intervention did not go as planned, but they blame themselves for not investing enough in the patient to ensure that they get the intervention that is necessary. How true is that statement in comparison to practice?
I mean, each therapist is very different. Each therapist has a very different approach. Some therapists a little more removed, not meaning that they're bad therapists or they don't care, but they have those very strong that very strong separation between client and self in terms of the professional setting. Other therapists like myself, to a certain degree, you do get invested. You care a lot. And so I wouldn't say necessarily that you blame yourself, but I think as therapists, we are more likely to look at, where did we maybe miss it? Where did maybe the client even miss it? And then we also look at, okay, how do we then approach it in such a way that they get it? So we are more flexible. We're more inclined to be flexible and take on different approaches to help the client get to where they need to be versus to say, this is how I operate. Whether you get it or not, whether it gives you the results or not, I've done my job, that's it. I
Sure.
think
Yeah.
quite invested therapists are more likely to say, oh, okay, quite disappointed that didn't work. But instead of the blame game, it's more of, okay, how do we make it work for you? Because there is no one size fits all for everyone.
Mhm. And in your experience, how has it been in terms of effectiveness? How long does it take for a client to start getting the results that they came into the office looking for? Because I know obviously if we're consulting maybe about some problem that I have, whether it's an addiction or it's depression or whatever the case may be, there's an objective to the consult and the intervention.
Hmm.
Usually, generally speaking, how long does it usually take for that person to start to see the difference from when they first walked into the to your consulting office to when they like, okay, now I see that there's been a lot of improvement?
Sure, that's a very hard one to answer. And I say this a lot because it's so true in terms of there is no one size fit all for clients. So one client can come in. I mean, I've had clients come in with a particular issue, and in 3 sessions, it's like, oh, cool. I have my answer. I'm good. See you next time I have a question type of thing.
Yeah.
And then I have some clients that I've been with for well over a year. And not to say that we're still dealing with the same issues, but because of the nature of some of the conditions that they maybe have, it is more about management. They do need a little bit more of that consistency, and each phase of their life comes with different challenges. And some people are more equipped to be able to face those challenges without needing the therapy space, and some people not. So I'll give a basic example for a client who maybe comes in with having issues with a boyfriend, right? A client like that might be around for 4, 5, maybe even 6 sessions and leave and they're okay and they've resolved whatever it is. But you might have a client that has medication resistant or treatment resistant depression. Now, a client like that, you don't know, because if they were not treatment resistant, if it wasn't so severe and they were not treatment resistant, you could probably say, oh, in this time span, they should start seeing improvements because the meds are also working simultaneously with the therapy. But when now you're sitting with someone who the doctors have gone through so many meds and it's still trial and error and their system is really fighting, but at the same time, they're still going through the life challenges on a day-to-day, you might end up being with that client for much longer. So I think it's quite important for people to understand that when people come into the therapy space, they need to be okay with going on the journey to what it requires of them and not come in with a conceived idea of what therapy should be. That a lot of the time is the frustrating point that makes people leave therapy prematurely because they think it's not working. But it's not that it's not working. You just haven't gotten to the end goal as quick as you thought because you have ideas about therapy. But generally speaking, in the therapy that I normally lean towards, which is the cognitive behavioral therapy, 6 sessions is considered a brief therapy process, right? So depending if the issue is not that huge or whatever, if the patient is whatever, it's normally 6 sessions. So we normally start off by contracting with my clients for 6 sessions, but with the understanding that about session 5, we're going to have a conversation and a discussion to see where you're at, and that might extend. A longer period is seen as a 12 session, but there's sometimes that go well over that or well under that. So it really is client dependent.
And I know we're still going to talk about mental health and, you know, basically my next question is around the stigma of going to a psychologist. You know, not
Mhm.
everyone is really willing to say, hey, okay, maybe I need therapy for this particular problem that I'm experiencing. And there's a lot of stigma around that man, you look going to a psychologist, can't you deal with that particular problem by yourself? Or, you
Mhm.
know, what would you advise someone who looks at it that way and says, okay, I want to see a psychologist, but there's a stigma around it and I don't know how to go around it, so to speak, of going to a psychologist?
I think the major thing I would say for most people is educate yourself. Because I think stigma comes from a lack of understanding of what exactly a psychologist is, especially in the media and all of that. Psychology has been, most people actually think psychologists do what psychiatrists do. So most people think you only go to a psychologist, when you are in a psychotic episode or when you have severe depression and can't get out of bed, or, so people's understanding of psychology, I think, is firstly the first step that needs to be altered, and that's why podcasts like this, using social media like Instagram and all of that is so important for practitioners to use to help educate people on a level that they can understand and engage in and be able to freely ask those questions and understand what that space is about. You still have some people who walk into a therapy room and say, oh, where's the couch? That
Yeah.
is psychoanalytic therapy
Yeah.
that was done in Freud's time at the birth of. We don't do couches. That's
We
not
don't
what
do
we do.
that.
You have some people walk into my
Yeah.
space and say, oh, you're wearing a tracksuit. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
cold outside. You're wearing a
It's
tracksuit. It's okay. So people have this idea about therapists
yeah.
are these put together superior people who are going to judge you or to give you all the answers to your problem or to medicate you or to throw you into a psychiatric facility or things like that. So I think first and foremost is education. Educate yourself on what psychology is. Understand what psychology is. And also understand that There's stigma with a lot of things in life. But at the end of the day, we all have a responsibility to self, to take care of self, and people need to get to a space where they are okay with being misunderstood or having, comments or whatever thrown at them, as long as they know that they're doing what's best for them, you know. Um, when you're sick, you go to a doctor. You have many people, especially men, and I'm talking about this kind of colloquially, where a man will be like, having the flu of his life, and you're like, did you go to the doctor? And you're like, no,
Like, nah.
I'm fine,
I'm guilty
okay,
of that. I am
you're
guilty of
fine.
that.
But when you realize that, look, I've been sick for over 2 weeks now. This is
Yeah.
not okay. This is not normal. Actually, my system is not coping with this. You will eventually, begrudgingly or whatever, eventually go and go to the doctor. Why? Because you're
Yeah.
understanding that you need that medication. With everything, when anything is happening, we know that there are certain things we need to do. Even if you don't want to do them, even though they're tedious, even though they're whatever, but we understand we need to do them for the betterment of self. And psychology is exactly the same thing. It is very human to go through emotional and mental distress or conditions or phases or anything like that. And going to a psychologist is the same as going to the dentist or going to the doctor or even going for your yearly discovery physical, to check your blood glucose and whatever. It's maintenance as well. The point with psychology, especially on a counseling level, is to say, reach out for help so that it doesn't get so dire that we're needing to admit you and go to the extremes. So education, I think just education. And once you have that education, allowing yourself to be someone in your circles who passes on that education. Because the more we normalize things, the less stigma
Comes with it.
impact.
Yeah. That's very interesting. And I just had a bit of a question. It's just running away from me on what you just said. But basically, oh yeah, now it's back. Basically what I wanted to ask is, do you think that psychology and going to see a psychologist is seen more of a health issue or another issue, or maybe a mental health issue, so to speak, than it is a health issue? Because again, like you're saying now, that you're giving the comparisons of, if you're sick and you have the flu, you go to the doctor. Do you think that psychology is being portrayed in that way, and the promotion of it, or the education of it, does portray it in that way?
Depends, right? Because there are different sources of, I guess, education or whatever the case might be. But to answer the question, the first part of the question, mental health, physical health, no difference. It's health. It is our entire bodily structure. From head to toe, we are a human being, right? So it should be seen, and it is a health service.
Issue.
We are
Okay.
mental health practitioners. We are registered with the same HPCSA as the doctors and everything. We are registered and we have the same, we have to go through the same process of getting practice numbers and being recognized as health practitioners, with the same board, with the same medical aids, everything. So I think the issue is actually people wanting to create more of a distinction between mental health and physical health, because that
Yeah.
doesn't actually really make much sense. How are we separating these two things? It's like saying, I'm only a person from my forehead down,
Yeah.
right? But mental health impacts everything. When you're
Mm.
physically stressed, it can affect you mentally. When you're mentally going through something, it affects you physically. So the same way, if I yes, I can go to a general practitioner if I have a cold or whatever. But if I'm having a heart issue, there's a specialist for that organ. I will go to a cardiologist. If I'm having bone issues, I will go to a orthopedic surgeon. And in the same way, if I'm having mental emotional issues, I will go to a mental health practitioner, such as a psychologist. So I think they maybe isn't a lot of explaining at that level. I think one fault I will say we have in the profession, and just in the health profession in general, is the use of jargon and the overcomplicating of of terms that makes it hard for people to really understand. But really, health from head to toe. So if we think about it that way, then we understand that mental health practitioners are not so out of the realm. They're actually part and parcel. And they have a specialization in a part of who I am as a human being, same as any other health specialist or surgeon or whatever the case might be.
And the reason why I'm asking this is because, there is that distinction between, especially in varsity, because
Mm,
psychology falls under humanities rather than,
mm,
the health faculty. So that's the reason why I'm asking the question of is that distinction between the two helping in the promotion of your mental health issues, and having to say, hey, look, psychologists are actually part, or psychology and going to a psychologist is part of your health that can be
mm,
covered in your medical aid and so forth and so
mm,
forth. That's why I'm asking
mm,
what I'm asking, because there is that distinction
mm.
of, if you want to be a doctor, you are in the um,
Health
health
sciences.
faculty in varsity, and then if you are want to be a psychologist, then now you're in the humanities, yet you're basically dealing with the same thing,
Mm,
which is health, basically.
mm. No, and you're very right. Actually don't even know why that is
it's
the case, to be very honest with you. I don't even want to lie. It doesn't make
yeah,
a lot of sense, especially hearing
yeah.
you saying it now.
Mm,
But it doesn't help the case at all. You're right. It
mm,
doesn't help the case at all because it does make it seem like this other from the
yeah.
human anatomy and the human
Mm,
function, which
mm,
it's not. It's a very key
mm,
part of, even when doctors, if you go in and you see a doctor, you're having whatever symptoms and stuff like that, they will also ask you, although they will not say it, but part of their questioning or screening is to check for um, emotional and mental distress, to be able
mm,
to rule that out from whatever physical symptoms you're presenting with. So within the field there is a understanding of sort, but within the field as well there is the stigma, because that kind of separation and distinction between doctors and psychologists and psychiatrists and etc. It's unhealthy. It doesn't help. Even within the hospital space and stuff, you don't really see a lot of that collaborative um, approach to that holistic approach to people's care. It's kind of like,
mm,
doctors will walk into a room and say, da, 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 it's not physical. I go see the therapist. Kind
mm.
of in saying like it's other,
Yeah,
rather than
yeah.
explaining the link between what you are facing physiologically is very much real for you, but the source is psychological. But the fact
Mm,
that you are experiencing these real physical symptoms should tell you that psychologically the two are linked, because you are one human being, and everything works together in one. So there is still quite a long way for us to go when it comes to the understanding and simplifying of and advocating of mental health. And we still have a ways to go as society in normalizing mental health as part and parcel of the entire human structure and life and experience.
mm,
It is a ways to go. I know this generation, I'm talking about kind of my generation of therapists, are doing a lot in terms of really trying to navigate that space and make it accessible and all of that. But we do still have a ways to go.
And I believe that's a good way to transition into the main topic of today. My last episode, I had Melody Mia, who is someone who brings awareness on mental health issues. And so the first question that I posed to him, which I will pose to you, is what is exactly mental health? Because I think it would be redundant for us to have this conversation without laying the basic foundation of what it is that we are talking about, so that everyone who is watching and be able to understand what exactly it is that we are talking about and what exactly is the concept of mental health?
So I think, I used to be asked this question a lot, and I used to just dive into it until I actually realized that a lot of the time when we use the term mental health, we are mentioned to different people, it means different things. Like the term gets used quite interchangeably with so many different things that even when you give a definition, it doesn't stick because we haven't actually broken it down the way we should. So I think it's important to understand that there is a difference between having good mental health. So there's like mental health, and I'll go into that now. But then there's also mental distress and then mental disorders. These are three different terms that need to be understood. Okay. So mental health, according to the World Health Organization, is the state of complete mental, emotional, physical, and social well-being. Okay. So if one has a complete state of physical, and now this is also talking to what you were just talking about now, because this comes from the World Health Organization, right?
Organization,
So
yeah.
complete physical, mental, emotional, and social well-being, right? But the important part is it says not merely the absence of disease or infirmity.
Okay.
So this is not to say just because I don't have a particular disorder or illness, mental health illness, does not necessarily mean I have or I am in good mental health or I possess good mental health. Okay. Then we have what we refer to as mental distress. So mental distress refers to the combination of unpleasant or uncomfortable or distressing emotions and physiological and psychological discomfort that can impact a person's daily functioning. Okay, so you can experience a wide range of mental and emotional distress without necessarily meeting the criteria for having a mental health disorder. So with mental distress, no, I'm not in complete mental health because I'm having emotional or mental distress, but it doesn't mean I'm sick or I have a mental health illness or mental health disorder. Mental health disorder is a diagnosis that you can only be given if you meet the full criteria of a particular mental health illness or disorder as per the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, which we're on version 5 right now, which is the global standard for mental health. So globally, anybody training as a mental health practitioner globally, I can't say you have depression unless you meet the criteria as per the DSM. I can't say you have, I can say you have traits, I can say you have symptoms of, but I cannot diagnose you with this thing unless I have done the clinical interview and checked and am able to say you meet this diagnosis because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So I think a lot of people tend to think that if I am in mental distress, it means I have a mental health disorder.
Okay.
People will say, I have anxiety, but they don't mean I have anxiety symptoms or I tend to struggle from anxiety here or there. A lot of times say, I have an anxiety disorder or I'm depressed or whatever. And it's like, no, yes, not that you don't have the symptoms thereof, but you don't meet the diagnosis. You're just having things going on around you where you are having a emotional or psychological response to what is happening that is placing you in distress and that is affecting your daily functioning. Okay.
Yeah.
So when we speak to mental health, we have to be quite clear in understanding that we're talking about something holistically being well, right? But that also does not mean that no one can ever be in complete great mental health at every single stage, right? Just to say that are you part of having good mental health is having the tools and the awareness of when you are in mental distress or whatever, of being able to acknowledge that, reach out for the help, and then have the tools of how to then put yourself back into a state of, okay, no, I'm in a mentally healthy space. So that's a distinction that I think a lot of the time gets missed. And we only look at mental health versus mental disorder. But majority of the population actually operates in mental distress.
Just yes. Um, what would you say is the basically criteria for where someone, I know, and I'm gonna choose the extreme side of it, where
Mm,
where is the position, or what is the position of now you need to seek out a diagnosis for mental health disorder? Because I know, you can get stressed, you can get symptoms, as you're saying, or some traits of
mm,
depression on a
mm,
day-to-day basis, but not meet the criteria of, hey, now you have a mental disorder. At what point should someone say, okay, I think this is it's now a prolonged um state of being mentally distressed? When is that limit, so to speak, if I can put it like that? Or when do you
mm.
say, or would you say, given that obviously you know the criteria of mental disorder, so obviously there are certain borderline traits that say, okay, no, 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 you need to seek some
Mm.
professional help where they can now diagnose you and see if you are indeed someone who needs help as a as someone who suffers from mental disorder.
I think the first, launch pad should be that you don't actually, that shouldn't be the question of
Okay.
when, of wanting to seek a diagnosis. I
Okay.
think that's where people go wrong in the first place.
Okay.
Because if I am wanting to seek, if I'm wanting things to be severe enough for me to then say I need to seek a diagnosis, one of two things will happen. One can be that I then leave it for so long that I'm getting worse,
Okay.
right? Um, and by the time I then do seek out, I might get the diagnosis, but it's not like having the diagnosis is going to sort out my issues, right?
Mm.
So whether I have the diagnosis or not, having the diagnosis, yes, is going to help your therapist to come up with a treatment plan that is tailored to what you are going through and how to assist you and all of that. But what I'm saying is, I think that's part of a lot of the stigma that's around there, that if it's not too bad, it's not
Okay.
severe enough to seek out help. And that is a very incorrect understanding, especially in the counseling psychology space. As I said to you in
Okay.
the beginning, in the counseling psychology space, we work on a very relational level. Not only need to see someone when they are so severe that they or they haven't slept in 7 days because they're suffering from extreme insomnia, whatever. That's not it. I think it's difficult to answer it fully because each and every single disorder has its own time frame where it says if someone has
Okay.
been having these symptoms for this long, then this and that. But the
Mm.
standard generally, and I'm saying this cautiously, but generally across the
Mm.
board is about 2 weeks to a month. So if someone has
Okay.
just been in a general state of not being themselves, struggling with and just mentally struggling. Every day is a bit of a struggle. They've noticed that change and they can't really get themselves out of it or something. 2 weeks to a month, I would say, don't go more than a month of being in distress that causes distress to your daily functioning. Okay,
Mm.
so if I'm having anxiety for about 2 weeks or so, it's going to take its toll. Because if the anxiety is impacting my sleep, then I'm gonna then start getting, cranky. I'm gonna find it difficult to go to work.
Mm.
I'm gonna have those physiological feelings of tightness of chest, body aches, all of that. It's impacting my life, whether it's impacting my life occupationally, socially, or otherwise. 2 weeks to a month of that, then it's around about time to say, also take into consideration that even if there is, look, they sometimes are very particular stresses. So, for example, exam times. It makes sense if
Mm.
students are presenting within exam times with anxiety or they're really not sleeping that well or this or that, right? So, what I would normally do is give them coping skills or whatever for that period and then say, look, if even after the stressor has been removed, you are still facing these symptoms, then you need to come back because it means there's something more. So sometimes there are those very direct things where, like, oh, I have this deadline or whatever. Once it's done, I'm going to be okay, right? But if you're also picking up a pattern of behavior that says every time I have a stressor, I get so out of whack to a point where, like, my eating goes down the drain, my sleeping goes down the drain, I'm fighting with my partner and kids, I'm struggling every single time, then it means that there's an issue because it's not normal. We're not, as humans, we're not made to be in the fight or flight mode at all times. Our cortisol levels, our stress levels are not meant to be operating at a high level at all times. That is not healthy. So I think it's more about people taking stock of self and saying, whatever I'm facing or experiencing, is it prolonged? Is it part of a pattern of behavior? And how is it impacting me? And if it is impacting you unhealthily and you are unable to get yourself out of that space, whatever that getting yourself out looks like, then it's time for you to reach out for assistance. Because sometimes assistance might just be understanding how you can better manage stress when there's stress present, or how you can better manage anxiety. Sometimes people will go through things and say, I don't even know I'm feeling this way. That's where we come in. I can help you figure out why you're feeling this way. So that next time you're able to identify, oh, it's this and this and this. And by the way, I've been given this and that tool. Okay, so I know how to manage it. So it's how do we live life on life's terms, but without thinking that we have to be bottom of the barrel before we can reach out for help. Think about it this way. If you have a cold, yes, you might not go to the ER, but you will go to Discam counter and you will speak to someone who is trained. They're not doctors, they're not GPs, but they're pharmacists. They've been trained in pharmacology, and they're able to say to you, oh, is it a dry cough or a wet cough? Is it this or that? Oh no, this brand is better, that brand is better. Try this, mix this. And you take that and you go home, and sometimes you get better. Sometimes you don't get better. Then you realize, okay, now I need to go to the GP. Then the GP will also tell you, okay, after this period of time, if you're not better, okay, then it means we need to take it up a notch. And that's the same with psychology. You don't have to be having pneumonia to come and ask for a cough mix.
Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. One of the things that I had asked that we talk about today was the impact of social media on uh, on mental health, because I believe there is a rise on it, and like you're saying, you don't have to be at the extreme level to say that there is a problem that is there. It is a problem that is coming up. What do you think social media, and what role has social media played in mental health issues that affect daily people?
I think it's played both a good and a bad role. Good in that it has created a platform that has allowed for more awareness around mental health. It has helped to normalize mental health challenges and seeking treatments, and all these type of questions. I mean, this is also regarded social media. We're having these conversations. People can come here and hear and find out and learn. It's given therapists like myself platforms where we can use what we've learned and disseminate that information to people without them necessarily having to book a therapy session that would cost them whatever amount of money you charge as a therapist. So I think in many ways it has created more of an awareness as well, because social media is global, right? So also being able to realize that, like globally, a lot of people are facing similar challenges, and removing that stigma around it and stuff like that. So I think in that sense, it has been very effective and very helpful and quite a positive tool. But on the other side of that, just like with any other topic, it's been quite negative, because you've had people who are not actually adequately trained as mental health practitioners, giving themselves titles and giving information that's not accurate. I think the use of jargon, mental health jargon, has also been quite misused. So, things like trigger.
Mm.
People say, "Oh, that was such a trigger," and it's like, no, that wasn't. That's not what trigger means.
Yeah.
That's not what it means. That's not what
Yeah.
it is. A very common one for the longest time, I was so baffled by it, is trauma bonding, where people
Mm.
really believe that trauma bonding referred to two people who've gone through trauma who then bond
Oh,
because
God.
they have that similarity. And it's like, that's not what trauma bonding is. It's not a good thing. Trauma bonding is actually where
A
you
bad
can go
thing.
in a very unhealthy situation because of your trauma, where someone actually takes advantage of a trauma
Advantage.
that you've
Mm.
gone through and uses that as, I don't even know who came up with the term, who decided to use the word bonding, but, things like that. So
Mm.
in a lot of ways, people have used the platform to push their own agendas. People
Mm.
have used the platform to just use terms however they deem and actually give very incorrect information. Some people have used the platform to be to scare people around mental health. Some people have used it to actually maintain stigmas around mental health. You'll see these short skits or this or that about like, oh, a man who goes to therapy is not a real man, or this or that. So as much good as it has done and as it can continue to do, I think
Mm.
it also has the power to create a lot of negative, if not adequately monitored. And if people also don't take the time to do their own research and
Mm.
verify the things that they are learning on social media. Because even me, saying I'm a counseling psychologist, which, I am, but people must have the right to and should want to even say, let me go look this girl up. Does
Mm.
HPCSA know she's a counseling psychologist? Or
Yeah.
is she just saying that? I can sound smart. I can say everything about mental health. Half of what I say, you can Google it. The other half, okay,
Mm.
yes, it's from experiential learning and because I'm trained. But what I'm
Mm.
saying is people also have the responsibility to verify and not just take everything that experts say or that mental health pages put out there as the gospel truth, because I think that's where the harm comes in. So it's a
Mm.
50-50. I would definitely say it has done as much good as it has harm.
Mhm.
But yeah.
No, that totally makes sense. And one of the things that I wanted to ask on was the issue of venting. Social media has created a space where people can actually vent out their problems, say whatever it is that they're going through. Some even cry and all of these things. Is that helpful to someone who is in mental distress, or is it something that you would say, hey, I wouldn't advise that you do that on social media?
Yo, you're asking me controversial questions. I have to be careful how I answer this one. Yo, oh, goodness
Hey,
pleasure.
I didn't say it was gonna be easy. I didn't say it's gonna be easy.
Controversy. People. Okay, all right. Give me a second. I have to
You have to
be
you have to
very
formulate your
careful.
words. Yeah,
Yeah, because I'm not sure. Yes, I'm in my personal capacity, but my personal
yeah.
capacity is also a mental health practitioner, so I have to be careful. But okay, look, I'm going to be honest. I'm just going to be honest and answer as me and as how
Mm.
I view mental health.
Okay.
It's the same as the answer that I just answered now. It's 50-50. Okay.
Mm.
Some people don't have anybody in their lives that they can vent to, that they can get any support from at all. They have nothing, they have no support. And social media can provide quite a supportive space because of late, we've seen how, pardon me, some of the most famous or popular, that's a proper word, some of the most popular, pages and content that is engaged with, it's about people's lives. People get invested in people's lives, like their day to day and their challenges and all of that. So, to one degree, I think it's helpful. Some people do it as an educational tool, as kind of a normalization. This and hey, mental health is not something that has to be hidden behind closed doors, etc. You can talk about it the same way you talk about something good that happens on social media. Why is it that you can't talk about when you're struggling emotionally or mentally? Okay. And some people do it quite boundaried as well. Yes, where they'll share certain things, and there's kind of like not a lesson, but kind of like a you're not alone vibe to it and everything, and it's okay, but they still will be able to identify when now this is beyond social media and I actually really need to reach out for professional help. Social media can be helpful in connecting people with the right people in terms of accessing like psychologists, for example, because a lot of people will say when you look for a psychologist, you Google them, whatever, all you see is their bio and their picture. You don't get a feel for who they are, So some people, if as a mental health practitioner, I'm posting things or whatever, or there's someone who's going through something, they see you're posting this and they send you a link to my page where you have more of a feel of on a humanistic level, is this a therapist that connect with whatever. So in terms of that, it's not necessarily unhealthy. To be clear, I'll say it's not unhealthy if you are still seeking the help and getting the tools. Then it's not unhealthy. Mm-hmm. It is unhealthy, on the other hand, when some people use it as the end all and be all. So I've come on social media, I've cried, I've said everything, I've vented, and then I take all those different comments from Tom, Dick, Harry, Josephine, and Father Abraham, 90% of who don't know anything about mental health. And then I'm trying to implement all these different things in my life, and I'm wondering, why am I still in mental and emotional distress? Some people do have the tools and they do have the avenues where they should be healthily engaging with whatever they're feeling and stuff, but because they don't have the emotional regulation, or it's about, I'm gonna, I get more numbers when it's a video of me crying or whatever, then in those spaces, that's very unhealthy. Very, very unhealthy. And it sets a very negative precedent for mental health and how do we approach it and how do we deal with it. So as a form of education and advocacy, and maybe just as a form of community, I wouldn't say it's the worst thing. But if we are using social media solely as the source of, as the platform for which to express ourselves and as the source of information and support to help us deal with mental and emotional distress, that can be very dangerous. That can be very unhealthy. And we forget as well that there are many people on social media who have mental health issues, who things like that can be quite derailing to them as well in terms of wherever they are in their process. So I think people need to be careful and be really ask themselves, why am I putting this out there? What is my purpose? And is this the healthiest and most effective way for me to deal with whatever level of distress I'm currently going through? It's a tricky one, it's a controversial one, but my general leaning is towards get the help. Get the help.
No, I'll leave it at that. I don't want to put you in an uncomfortable situation, and I know that we actually have run out of time, but I'm going to ask for like 15 minutes extra because there's just with this one point
No
that I
worries.
want to pick your mind on, and that is
Okay.
what role does finance and the appearance of finance on social media have an impact on the daily mental state of people, because we see a lot of, this is why, okay, I would believe many people even get scammed because they see the lifestyle on social media. They see the flashy cars, the flashy house, and whatever the case may be, and they thinking that I need to do 1 2 3 4 to attain this level, and then when they don't do that, it depresses them, or makes them have depression syndrome, or symptoms rather, not syndrome. What role does that play? What role does finance play when it comes to mental health, uh, issues?
So this is a very interesting one. Look, I'm not really or let me rather say, yeah, no. Generally, I'm not really a social media person. There's certain platforms I absolutely refuse to get on because I'm just like, it's too much. Like there's way too
Yeah,
much going on, and
too
just
much
kind
of
of the
them. Yeah.
expectations, and just there's too much. But what I will say is, because I understand the role that these platforms play in society daily, if I'm saying I am an advocate on a community level, I need to kind of engage, even if I don't really want to, but try to limit it to healthy ways, etc. And this I've seen come up, not necessarily in terms of mental health, but there's been this back and forth on mental health around, on social media around influences, around exactly what you're asking in terms of saying, um, you have those people showing the down to earth, normal. I go to work every day. I don't necessarily risk life. I make the most of what I have, cleaning vlogs, cooking vlogs, but very, day to day normal versus
Mm.
those very highly aesthetic. I live in a sky-rise penthouse in New
Yeah.
York. I have the latest everything. My skincare routine
Yeah.
has 500 steps with, gold
Yeah.
in my lipstick, and everything I post is about the holiday I've been in Cabo, and everything. And there's this
Mm.
back and forth that goes on where people are kind of like, which one is better?
Mm.
And unfortunately, as people, as society, there's always been a desire for wealth, right? But what wealth is has changed over time. Where a couple of years back, wealth could have been seen as owning a home, no matter how modest, but the fact that I own it and it's mine. In some
Mm.
cultures, wealth is seen by how many kids you have, not by what fancy car you drive. In the olden days, and actually still in some cultures now, wealth is how much livestock do I own? You
Do
know,
have.
so I
Mm.
could have a million in livestock sitting out there and walk around looking like Farmer Bob, and I don't care. I still have the respect and the whatever because my wealth lies in whatever.
Mm.
But unfortunately, social media has shifted the pole of wealth to, I think, very unrealistic levels. Because the reality of it is because of the world we live in, because of the economic structure of a lot of countries, especially in our African countries and South Africa in and of itself. I mean, right now our rent has gone up and down how many times? Just because of
Mm.
GANC. That's how unstable things are, And the reality is, in a country like our own, it's not going to be likely that every second person is a millionaire. I mean, at this
Mm.
stage, our unemployment rate is just what we even need to look at, before we even talking about that glitz and glam and whatever. And I think a lot of the
Mm.
time people do not live in the reality of their context. And I'm not saying at
Mm.
all that it requires people to be comfortable with poverty or be comfortable with, or people shouldn't be ambitious. But I
Mm.
think where people put their ambition and what they put as the gold standard for having a good life is unrealistic. And social media plays a humongous role in that. And
Mm.
so I think it does play a very big role because then someone will say to you, yes, I have a good job. I have a loving partner. I have two amazing kids. But I am living in Acadia.
Mm.
Whereas my dream has always been to live in Kyalami Estate. Guys, we can't all live in Kyalami Estate. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Should you
Yeah.
work towards it? Yes, great. But this
Mm.
unrealistic expectation, especially of how quick we want things to happen for us, puts us, a lot of people, in a state of, oh, I'm not making it in life, and puts them in a state of distress or depression or whatever the case might be, because they're not judging their life against their life. They're judging
Mm.
their life against other people's lives. And so one big pill that I always tell people in therapy, and when I say it, they look at me like I'm crazy, and some don't talk to me for a while, and then they come back later and they realize what I'm talking about, but it's the idea of radical acceptance.
Mm,
You can only flourish in your life, truly be happy, truly flourish. Not saying that you stop striving for better, but learn to be in the here and now and flourish once you have a radical acceptance that life is life. And none of us can control what life throws at us. And your
mm,
responsibility as a human being is to do the best with what you have been given. Life is unfair. We are not all going to reach the same heights in the same ways at all. It might not be your generation that lives in Kyalami State. It might be your kids' generation or their kids' generation because of the things you have done in the here and now. But
mm,
until we learn radical acceptance and until we learn to live in the present and until we learn gratitude, we will always be in a rat race and we will miss out on life because we are not allowing ourselves to be in the here and now. We are always wondering the next, the next, the next. And then it's 30 years later, you turn around and you realize I was living in the future so much so that I lost out on everything about the present when I was in it. So social
mm.
media in terms of that, honestly, it's one of the things that make me not like it, especially with the young generation. You know, you have 10-year-olds telling you about, oh, I want you to buy me the Laneige lip eyes.
Yeah,
What do you know about a 2,000 rand lip eye? You are 10 years old.
yeah, yeah,
I need to go to the Vaseline or the Labello and get moving, you know?
yeah.
And you ask, where do these things come from? So you even
Mm,
find little kids who really bully each other because my mom drives a Range Rover and when they drop you a venture. I
yeah.
get 50 rand to be at the tech shop every day. You have a packed lunch that maybe doesn't have a juice or sweets. So that's
Mm,
how impactful social media is. And I think once again, it goes back to that responsibility of we need to be careful what we consume, how we consume it, and how much of it we internalize and try to replicate because it can have very unhealthy outputs in our lives.
mm. That is, wow, brilliant. I have no words. That was brilliant. And I would like to thank you for coming through tonight, and sitting down with me. I did say that I always finish up my podcast with rapid questions that I ask my guests. So I hope that you are ready. I hope they won't be
I'm not gonna be
controversial.
ready because I don't know what the questions are. But
Hey,
anyway, I must
hey.
just be ready for controversy, judging by your other questions. So okay, I'm ready.
Not even.
Okay.
Yeah, but my first question that I always ask my guests is, what is your favorite time of the day?
Ooh, my favorite time of the day is
Mhm.
evening. I used to be a morning person, not anymore. Evening around 8:30, because I have then wrapped up my day. I've seen my private clients, and I'm doing my nighttime routine, getting ready to just like. So yeah, 8:30 in the evenings are my
Yeah.
best times.
Okay, that's very interesting. And what is your guilty pleasure?
Hmm. I think I have two. One is chocolate. I'm such a chocoholic. I blame my dad for that.
Okay.
He used to always buy me chocolate as a kid, and that's my go-to guilty pleasure. And I think the other one is watching old shows. So I get very embarrassed when people ask me, "What are you watching on Netflix now?" Because I'm probably watching something that was out of production 10 years ago. But
Yeah.
so crime drama shows vibe, but like
Yeah.
oldies. I mean, I just finished watching 8 episodes of Monk. Monk stopped being recorded in 2010
What?
or something like that. But
Yeah.
the joy it gave me. So that's my other guilty pleasure.
That's
Very
very
weird.
interesting. Very weird, but very interesting. What is your current read?
My parent, oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed to say I have not touched a book in months.
Ah,
I have a bookshelf full of books that I bought, and I was like, this is my
ah,
year. I'm going to read a book a
yeah.
month. Haven't touched it. Haven't touched a book in a while. In 2 months. Oh my gosh, in 2 months. But the book I was reading, I mean, I still have to force myself to finish now, is called Grown
Mm,
Ups by Marian
okay.
Keyes. So that's the one that has a bookmark halfway through, and you've just reminded me. July,
You
July
need
is
to
the
go back
month.
to reading.
Finishing. I'm
Yeah.
going to finish.
And you are a psychologist, and obviously psychology has a lot of, people who developed it, your Freud and your oh my God, look at the names running away from me now. But what is your favorite psychologist who have developed the theories of psychology?
Hmm. That's tricky because there are
Mm,
two that I use
mm-hmm,
um, a lot, and I'm just like, okay, who do I say is my favorite? But actually, the person that I think is, yo, this is
mm,
tough.
I got you there. I got you.
You
That's the
got
whole
me.
point.
Like you really, yo. Okay, so I will
Mm,
say Aaron Beck
okay.
because he developed the cognitive behavioral therapy, right? Which is the therapeutic framework that
Mm,
I use the most, right? So
mm,
um, I really love just how practical it is, how so easy it is to just apply and people to understand, and it gives you those real outcomes. It's quite easy to track progress, etc. So I'll definitely say he is one of my favorite theorists. Um, yeah, let me stick with him
Just
because it's gonna get.
okay.
I'm gonna Beck.
Okay.
Beck is my guy.
Okay. And this is the last one. This one is for the future brother-in-law. I'm giving you an assist here. What is your favorite date, or what would you consider as the perfect date?
You and your brother are gonna
This
see the
this
end of me. But
Hey,
perfect date.
we want to collect the cows. We need to collect the
Clearly, y'all are
cows.
on a mission. Because in the other podcast, I was busy being told asked why I'm not mentioning partners.
Yeah.
Guys,
Yeah.
okay. Um, perfect date. I'm a very
Mm,
simple person. I think for me, any date that shows intentionality and effort, and then that also consists of actually spending quality time. So a space that would allow for actual conversation and getting to know one another. So for I think a first date would for me that would be really great would be I love the outdoors. So something that maybe starts with the outdoors like a safari. I love wild animals. So something like a safari, a sunset safari, and then with a candlelit dinner with nice views. And then, yeah, if it's on a day, then that's when I'll know the intentionality is there. Because if they've done the research, they would know which day has a full moon or a unique moon.
ah,
So if
interesting.
dinner would then end with like a walk and viewing the moon,
Someone.
that would be
Hmm.
my perfect date.
Future brother-in-law, the ball is in your court now. I've done all the work for you. Tebogo, thank you.
Wow!
Thank you for coming. Thanks for joining me tonight. I know
You
I
really
went
are.
over the time we had agreed on, but
It
really I
didn't even feel
appreciate
that long. When you're like, we're out of time, I was like, huh?
what? Yeah. But thank you for coming. And to my audience, I thank you for tuning in. And don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and share this video. Let us know what your thoughts are on our discussion today and what you've learned. And I will see you on the next video. Peace.